This week I photographed eagles and whales with this inexpensive Fuji lens. Let me show you the results and how I process them. So when I was asked to go on this shoot with some local photographers, I was somewhat reluctant because I'm pretty sure I didn't have the right gear. In addition to this cheap lens, which has a maximum aperture of 6.7 at full focal length, I'm also shooting on an APS-C sensor, which is noisy when shot in low light or in the shadows. And since the shoot was to begin at first light, I'm figuring, okay, I'm going to need a fast shutter speed for the birds and any other wildlife that might be happening. And since I'm shooting from a boat, I'm going to need as much speed, shutter speed, as possible. So I'm going to be shooting with a high ISO. So I know I'm going to have a lot of noise at the end. And Fuji is not known for their autofocus ability. So I was relatively sure this was going to be a major crapshoot. Crap being the operative word. Anyway, let me show you what I've got. Okay, let's do one animal at a time. This is a whale we first saw, and you can see that I shot a couple of, or a few sequences, hoping to get the right one. Now this is a little bit early, and that's just about right. I wanted the tail a little bit higher, and a little higher, and that's too high. Now the reason it's too high is because the tail is high, and it intersects this lovely line on the horizon just before the mountains in the distance. So I like to go back one. And even though the tail's not quite as high, I do like the relationship of the background to the tail. So the first thing I'm going to do is denoise. So now if you look, it's fairly noisy in the shadow areas, in the background, all that. You can see that noise happening back there. Now, my shutter speed was 25/100th of a second, and the aperture was f6. And that brought my ISO up to, I had a floating ISO, so that brought the ISO up to 2000. So not as noisy as it could have been, I guess. It was a little bit lighter. During that part of the day, probably about 45 minutes after sunrise. So let's have a look now. Let's take the noise down. This is usually my workflow, especially if there's noise to be had. So I'm just going to denoise, run that process. This is taking a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm patient. Okay, the denoise algorithm has taken place, and you can see the difference. If I turn it on and off, there's the noisy part, and there's the cleanup. Now, when you use denoise, you always have to sharpen afterwards, and that's because, you know, part of the denoise algorithm takes away some of the details, so you most definitely have to add a little sharpening. So I'll add a little bit of sharpening until I get to where I think it works. Not too much, of course. The other thing I like to do after I denoise is add a little bit of grain. Now, grain gives the impression that an image is sharper than it actually is. So if it does still look a little bit soft, I will add a little bit of grain. And like if you look at movies shot on film, the reason they look so sharp is because of the film grain very often. So if the image itself is not sharp, the film grain gives the impression of sharpness. So I'll just bring up that grain just a little bit. Now, if I were to print this, that grain kind of goes away once the ink hits the paper. So I'm not too concerned about it. And I kind of like the effect of it. Now, after I do that, of course, well, not of course, but what I'll do is I will decide on my crop. So I've got some structure of the boat here that I have to crop out or clone out. I think I can crop it out and still get the kind of image that I want. And let's say probably a little bit more, 6.9 is probably where I want to be with this. Yeah, 6.9. That should be just about right. Maybe a little less foreground. Yeah, more like that. It's like that. Okay. Yeah. So the next thing I want to do is, again, check it over. Make sure there's nothing I have to clone out. I'm getting a little bit of ugliness here, but I can fix that later. Now I could add, at this point, a little bit of a mask just to hold everything together, particularly in the foreground. So I add a linear gradient in the foreground. That will kind of lead the eye into the main subject, which is the whale's tail. And in order to hold it at the top, I might add a gradient again at the top. Linear gradient, just a little bit to hold the eye in the frame. Just a bit, maybe like so. So yeah, that's not so bad. Now I kind of like the blueness of it all, but if I so chose, I can warm that up a little bit. And when I warm it up, it almost looks grayscale or black and white, which I'm not that opposed to. Again, it's an aesthetic choice, whichever you choose. And there it is. Cheap lens, a little bit of noise reduction, a little bit of sharpening, a little bit of added grain, and you have an acceptable image. Again, I've got to deal with what's going on there. So, many of the images I shot that day were processed in much the same way. My process is simply denoise if necessary, sharpen if necessary, usually, add a little grain if necessary, and then I'll set my white point, my black point, I'll adjust the exposure, I may boost the color a little bit, I'll add a mask or two, a linear gradient or a radial gradient. So I'll show you the rest of the images that I shot that day, and let me know what you think. Well, there it is. Thanks for watching. Give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.